your new film, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, tells the story of a murder investigation, or at least the search for a body. And I believe it was based partly or inspired partly by the experiences of Eshan Kesal, who co-wrote and appeared in your previous film, Three Monkeys. How did you come across this story, and what was the appeal of it when Eshan told you about it?
You know, Ercan is a doctor, so doctors has lots of stories. And in Turkey, the doctors has to make 2 years of obligatory social service in the Anatolia, in the remote places of Turkey. So in 80s, when he was 25 years old, about 25 years old, he went to the Anatolia and worked in this town that we shot the movie for 2 years. And then he stayed 3 more years after his service finished. So as a young doctor, they have really huge amount of responsibility. They make autopsies, they deal with many problems. So they have lots of stories, like Chekhov, you know. So he used to tell most of them in the dinners, in the lunch, because he's my close friend. And he also told about this one day, just arbitrary, you know, not on special purpose, that they searched the body until the morning, and they became like a friend with the killer until they find the body. At first, we didn't think to make a film out of it, but one day, I don't know how, but we tried to make a script out of it. And we came together, the same crew, my wife, Ercan, and myself. Of course, the script reality is completely different. So we had to rewrite everything. We changed the reality completely. He doesn't remember much at all. We created all the characters, but still the real thing guided us, because it's a complicated story, you know. So it guided us, but we changed everything. Also, we have some quotations from Chekhov stories here and there. So it's how it came out.
And because you yourself grew up in Anatolia, was that part of the attraction for you, wanting to deal with that sort of society?
Actually, I always wanted to tell a story about small town bureaucrats, because my father was one of them. So when this story came into account, I was a bit happy, because I wanted to make a film out of it. So when we create our characters, of course, I always based on my my memories and things like that. I remember many things about, you know, in the towns, there is a town hall, and all the bureaucrats are in the same building, and there is a huge amount of struggle between them. There is a power struggle, you know, and there is an incredible amount of humiliation between them. That's something I always remember.
One of the things I was interested in was the way that certainly the police officer keeps saying, we do things differently here. We punish people. We treat, if they act like animals, we treat them like animals. And he keeps trying to explain this to the doctor and to the prosecutor, that it's a very old-fashioned sense of justice. And that seems to be at odds with, very different to the ideas that the prosecutor and the doctor have. Did you want to explore that gulf, that gap in the way that people think about crime and punishment?
I think it's because of their personality are different. The police chief is coming from the more local background, and the prosecutor and the doctor is city background more, and they are more educated people. they have a higher education also. They are more intellectual. So that's why maybe prosecutor decides to tell his story to doctor.
There's a link.
Yeah,
between
there's a
them,
link
yes.
between them, and also, but it's not only the education. Also, the doctor's melancholic and his personality seems to him suitable.
Yes, they both seem more introspective than the local people
Yeah,
who joke and get angry with one another and argue
yeah,
and
yeah,
talk about hunting and yogurt and guns and things.
yeah.
Whereas the doctor especially seems very removed. A lot of the time he's just an observer. He seems
Yeah.
to be just watching.
He's foreigner of the commune, actually. He's, of course, more melancholic and man with nihilistic attitudes. So, but we told the story quite from the eyes of the doctor. And the doctor, of course, is the personality that I knew best because he looks like myself, probably. So it was easy for me to construct his character. So it was easier for me to tell the story from the eyes of him.
You mentioned Chekhov earlier, and of course Chekhov was a doctor, but doctors frequently are in his stories. And I was very interested by the fact that you have these quotations from Chekhov, but it's more than just quotations, isn't it? The film has some of the spirit of Chekhov.
Probably, I don't know. Really, I can't see it like you maybe in the process. But at the same time, the characters are quite Turkish. And the film is released in Turkey, and the critics and the people generally found it very realistic. So that means that maybe Chekhov really wrote his stories, the human values, quite international. I mean, how do you say?
Universal.
Universal, yeah.
Yeah.
So it exists everywhere.
Well, I think this is proven by your films. If we go back to Small Town or Uzak, you're dealing with very specific situations, very specific characters, communities, but they've been very successful around the world in many ways, and people understand them from their own perspective. I think one of the strengths of your work is working from quite a personal level, almost autobiographical. And this film, would you agree it is as personal as your first 3 or 4 films?
Actually, if you really want to be realistic, and if you can be realistic a little bit, the film becomes universal somehow, because human is the same everywhere, I believe. It doesn't change. The main values, the base of the human is really the same everywhere in the world. So I always think that I make very local movies, and I'm so surprised later when everybody understands it in the world.
You talk about it being realistic, and this film is shot in a very different style from Three Monkeys, your previous film, which was almost expressionist in places. This film has gone back to, I think, more the style of Climax or Uzak even.
Probably because in Three Monkeys I wanted to create an atmosphere, a style, and a look entirely specific for that film. So, but it was for that film, and now I go back again, the natural look again. And for this film, I tried to be as natural as possible in the colors, in the other things. Yeah.
That must have been quite difficult because a lot of the film is shot when it's getting dark or when it is dark.
Yeah.
And to create that in the countryside must have been quite difficult for you.
It is, but that difficulty is nothing really when you compare it with the script writing and the creating the characters. That's the most difficult thing. The other thing is just lights and you know, there is a way that you can follow. It's expensive and difficult, but still not that difficult.
And you have worked a lot with digital technology in your recent films. Has that made it easier to get what you want?
Definitely, but more than that, it's cheaper if you shoot a lot. If your shooting ratio is high, then it becomes cheaper. But it doesn't change, you know, because if you shoot film also today, in the next step, they turn digital. They scan it, and they come in the same place. They meet at the same place. If you shoot digital, and they shoot film, and they scan it, they are digital both. So it doesn't differ, but my shooting ratio is a bit high. And if the shooting ratio is low, then the actors begins to be a bit nervous, you know. I don't want that.
How high is your shooting ratio?
I don't know, it's quite high. Uzak, it was a total of 13 hours of footage we shot, but here it's about 120 hours.
That's quite high.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it pays off. It's a wonderful
film.
So
we don't make rehearsals, you know.
No.
We shoot everything.
Really?
Including the rehearsals, because sometimes in the rehearsals you catch some miracle
freshness.
and freshness, and you cannot catch it again sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's better to shoot.
One of the great things about this film, I think, is your use of ambiguity.
Yeah.
Whether the doctor is talking about a friend's wife or his own wife, and not the doctor, the prosecutor, sorry, and why people do things. You almost try to deliberately withhold information so that we're always, even at the end, we're left wondering about why people do things.
You know, the literature always has an advantage over cinema because, you know, everybody knows that literature also use the imagination of the reader. We can make the same thing to a certain amount with ambiguity in cinema. So you can take the imagination of the audience into account, and without using it, without making the audience active, you cannot go deep enough in cinema, I believe. Definitely you need some ambiguity, but ambiguity shouldn't mean that arbitrary ambiguity.
No.
It should be calculated, and you should know your answers as a director, you know, and be carefully, because without knowing the answers yourself, if you don't have answers, you cannot direct the actors.
Yes.
In life, we live like that. We create half of the reality ourselves. I mean, because life is full of ambiguities.
Yeah.
And we are used to be active in life. Why not in cinema?
Yeah. One of the questions that is asked in the film is why us? It's I think the prosecutor's wife says why us? Oh no, it's the police captain's wife talking about their child's illness, and actually that one of the big themes of the film is actually why death. Do you feel that because death is such a presence in this film, it's not just looking for this body, it's throughout the film.
That is everywhere. Yes, because that is everywhere in the province. That's something amazed me, and I think it's a correcting. Because in the city and also in the Western culture also it's more, I think, that the death is isolated. We try to hide that, so our connection with the death is getting smaller and smaller, and I think it's a more healthy thing to be in relation with the death as a part of life.
Yeah. On the one hand, you are talking about the presence of death, but also it seems to me another strong motive in the film is our responsibility towards children and people. I won't say too much about it, but children become more and more important in the film. Was that something that you wanted to bring out very strongly, that side of our responsibility towards younger generations?
Maybe it's out of my own, because I am a father now, and it changed me a lot about my vision of life. And as my child grows, it increased, I think. So my look to the children is really changed. And I found new sources of love in my heart. And I feel that I was quite dry before. Maybe that's out of it, I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Nuri.
Thank you very much.